Sir Larry, if not now, when? Writers Club of Central Village, Monday, 29th April 2024. An interesting story about the world of cricket at a crucial time. I have given the name Sir Larry to the protagonist, who discusses certain elements of the game from his unique perspective. Rabbi Hillel, the ancient Jewish sage who lived in the 1st century BCE, once said, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? If not now, when?" President Obama employed these words in a speech to Philadelphians, accurately acknowledging the source and urging action around health insurance reform for 46 million Americans who were uninsured and millions more underinsured. "We cannot put this reform aside and we cannot give up," the president stated. I had the pleasure of listening to a recording on Thursday evening, 25th April 2024, which occurred 41 years after the squad of West Indian cricketers accepted an invitation to tour and play as a team in South Africa. However, this was after the cricket world had banned such tours to show disfavour with the abhorrent policy of apartheid imposed by that country's white, racist minority administration. I was in the final year of my History Honours degree programme at the University College of the West Indies when reports of the cataclysmic massacre of 70 peaceful demonstrators hit the airwaves in 1960. They were protesting unarmed and non-violently against the unconscionable pass law restrictions. Along with fellow students in our red undergrad gowns, faculty members in black, and staff, I participated in the university's first public protest march. We were presumably driven by the twin emotion of black solidarity and anguish at the cruelty of Prime Minister Forward's government. They called him the architect of apartheid. Like many who were appalled by the violence meted out to the black population, I accepted, I suppose, the mantle of responsible maturity, and the experience of that eclectic transformation has been increasingly seared in my memory. Jamaica was the first majority black population in the entire world to live from 1944 with the rights and privileges afforded under a system of adult suffrage, the entitlement of both men and women to vote at age 21. Sir Larry is the name I've ascribed to this Jamaican batsman character because it seems fitting given his accomplishments and disposition, and because I hold him in great esteem as I do several other Jamaicans on whom a knighthood has been deservedly bestowed. But the individual is not a night bachelor. He's a sportsman of integrity who, when he's ready and the season is right, will tell his own story. I've heard him speak his truth, and it is simple and credible, and all I may be able to add to the context is the perspective of another Capricornian who is his senior by a decade. Larry was in the heyday of West Indian dominance across a cricketing diaspora comprised of former colonial possessions of the British Empire, an impeccable celebrity cricketer. To protect him and his family, I have revealed his nom de plume and not his real name, although I have every confidence that the details are true. He belonged to that cadre of cricket greats like Donald Bradman and Sir Larry Constantine, the latter a Trinidadian who migrated to Britain and was in 1969 elevated to the House of Lords. Other knight of the realm and enthusiastic cricketer was Sir Laurence Olivier, Baron Olivier, the illustrious actor of stage and screen who adored and played cricket off stage. And yet another immortal cricketer was Sir Garfield Sobers of Barbados. Jamaica in the 1960s became an independent nation with a voting majority population of African ancestry. At about the same time, particularly during the 60s and 70s, the appalling condition of the black segregated population in South Africa was a hellhole. The social, educational, and economic condition and any prospect of improvement for blacks was not apparent. So Larry tells the story of being there in the 1980s and how his group were constantly followed around by two black youngsters. When the young men were asked why, they replied that they were hoping to find out for themselves what a free black sportsman and cricketer looked like. It made Larry sad, for he had cherished from a tender age the idea of knowing South Africa and meeting their excellent cricketers. He realized then that although his Rebels team had broken certain temporary restrictions, their presence among the oppressed black population could have a salutary effect as live exhibits of happy, kind, and friendly black exponents of the thespian-like artistry involved if one actually plays the game of cricket. But the abject poverty of people who looked like himself was depressing. It was not merely the money, it was the uncertainty of life as a black, poor West Indian cricketer. He knew he would not be able to change the system as it was too entrenched from its colonial underpinnings to change at a dime. He reassured himself, however, however long it took, the system would change and the improvements would follow for the little boys who had never seen free, happy, prospering blacks like the players on his team. His parents resided in Florida, and he sought their approval. He explained to them that bucking the big shots by going to play cricket in South Africa was not a selfish act. It was motivated by the tremendous opportunity it offered his colleagues, who would otherwise suffer extreme financial embarrassment. If he were to refuse to go, there would be no tour, and their hopes of financial security, which Caribbean cricket boards could not afford, would be dashed. His parents understood his motivation and gave their blessing. Because he was not prescient, Larry did not know the exact date when change would inevitably come about. In fact, it took only another 6 years before Mandela, who was in prison from 1964, was released, and constitutional changes in South Africa began to take shape. But conditions on the ground in Jamaica were at the time not all that rosy, for even a promising cricketer like our protagonist. First-class cricketers in the West Indies were then poorly paid. Quote, several others were disillusioned with the elitism of the West Indies Cricket Board, and for not selecting them in spite of several players' outstanding performances. And also, they resented the board's high and mighty take-it-or-leave-it uncaring lack of transparency. For several talented players, it meant irregular or no employment in the off-season. The attempt, as part of the same statement from Wikipedia, to contradict the reality by gratuitously adding the amounts that players received for the 2 tours, was at best capricious and at worst mischievous. We have learned, based on the testimony of persons involved in these rejected interventions, that some genuine attempts that would have added pay to the players and additional interest for fans were summarily rejected by the movers and shakers in the top echelons of Jamaica cricket. And yet there were magical elements at play, such as the overabundance of talent, which Caribbean countries lack the funds, the will, and the entrepreneurial imagination to explore. There was a time when the West Indies, based on performance of players, could have fielded 2 really strong, competitive teams. Sir Larry played more than 24 test matches between 1972 and 1990 and averaged 43.55 runs, including 7 centuries and 7 half-centuries. In his very first test, he debuted by scoring against New Zealand 214 and 100 not out at Sabina Park, a feat which still remains a world record that some appear to have forgotten.
But that should not be, because it was the first time that a cricketer had scored a double and single century on his debut.
With such success at the wicket, Larry, in everyone's judgment, had elevated himself by his superb form to the status of an immortal. It also gave him a magic average of 314 after his first Test match. Sir Larry in 1974 scored a triple century, 302, at Barbados' Kensington Oval against England, continuing his rise to fame, and this remains the highest score by a West Indian at the Oval. He is one of only 4 West Indians to have scored a triple century, the others being Garfield Sobers, Chris Gale, and Brian Lara. When Larry arrived in Australia, he was being hailed as the best batsman in the world. The Australians overwhelmed the West Indians, and Larry sustained some injuries and never seemed to regain his batting form. Yet, Michael Holding described him as the best batsman I ever saw, and Sir Gareth Sobers believed, quote, Sir Larry could have been the greatest of all West Indian batsmen. The South Africa tours in 82 and 84. Although the teams who toured in South Africa for 2 seasons lost the 50 over and drew the first-class contest in their first tour, they went on to win both series in the subsequent tour. The experience also created a better respect for black pair as it opened the eyes of the West Indians to a brighter future. And the announcement of the 21st century, there had been so dramatic a change in the scene that South Africa was not anymore nor anywhere seen as the pariah. In a spirit of appeasement and reconciliation, the sorry past took its rightful place in the rear-view mirror. UNOMSA and South Africa's new constitution. In South Africa and Jamaica, where people had been hurt in one way or another by the racial tension and geopolitical trauma, historians and serious fans have acknowledged the reality of the tremendous changes being made in South Africa. Throughout most of the Commonwealth, these supporters and cricket lovers have accepted the new features brought about by reconciliation, and as if it were buried the hatchet, insofar as the atrocities in South Africa are concerned. Left behind are the sensitivities of the past, and they have in a conciliatory spirit taken a positive approach since apartheid policies were abandoned. The world turned its attention to the positives of the future through stabilization and reconciliation. If there are a few who still appear to be obsessed with the evils of the past and consider when absolution will be afforded those who may have offended, the South African administration and the West Indian players who demonstrated the virtues of freedom and adult suffrage and racial harmony through equality, that would be unfortunate. I know, as a friend of the Chief of Mission of the United Nations Observer Mission to South Africa in 1994, the genuine efforts and remarkable accomplishments that took place in the 90s in South Africa. My erstwhile study partner as a UWI student and close friend, Angela King, went to work in the United Nations, and I have reread the paper she presented on the 26th January 1994 at the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation in Johannesburg. Quote, apartheid and its predecessor structures are responsible for a 300-year evolution away from democracy and mutual understanding. Outbreaks of violence of the sort seen frequently in Natal and the East Rand are the most destabilizing manifestations of the problem. In looking to the future of South Africa with a democratically elected government, UNOMSA is optimistic. While it is foolhardy to paint a picture of spontaneous harmony and understanding upon the installation of the government of national unity, UN observations, both here and abroad, strongly suggests that the fact that the whites-only government has indeed facilitated its own demise will promote reconciliation between the races. The sorry, dark past of night has, in the opinion of the majority of cricket fans and administrators worldwide, been left behind. And for Sir Larry, there was a bright ray of sunshine when in 2011 a surprise call came from a friend in the Jamaica cricket circle who informed him that there was a move afoot to honour his significant contribution to the game. There were plans to rename the Players' Pavilion the Sir Larry Players' Pavilion. Additionally, the southern end of the ground would be called the Michael Holding end and the northern section the Courtney Walsh end. In addressing the media shortly after the ceremony, Sir Larry said, quote, "I'm happy that the JSA can bestow this on me. Today is the final death of that tour I led 28 years ago, and I don't want to rehash a lot of that situation right now. I want to move forward from now on, and what the Jamaica Cricket Association has done is to give me the opportunity to finally lay this thing to rest." The bans that caused the rebel team to be admonished and almost exiled were lifted in 1989, and as Angela King confirmed, quote, "the fascist system was being replaced with democracy in South Africa." In fact, Larry went on to say, "One member of the team I led to South Africa actually came back and played for the West Indies. So given that implicit forgiveness, there seemed no need at that time to step out and do anything that would be an unnecessary and embarrassing reminder of where certain members of the cricket family had erred, and a rebuke inflicted by the rest of the civilized world. It appeared to me and others that the past is the past, and that had gone by, and more harmony would result by accepting the about turn than by reliving depressing episodes of a time that would never come back. I thought," said Sir Larry, "that before the actual renaming of the pavilion was done, it would be fitting to apologize to all Jamaicans. Today, I sincerely apologize to the cricket fraternity of the Caribbean and the world." Cricket icon Courtney Walsh declared his support for that statement and expressed regret that Michael Holding was unavoidably unable to participate in the ceremony. No one has the right to insist, nor has it been suggested to him that he had to be pardoned by any cricket institution, or that public confession and absolution were prerequisites, or a sine qua non of the offer voluntarily made to him and freely accepted by him. It so happened, however, that there was opposition from at least one prominent activist representing a political party who stoked a protest. Following that criticism of the plan to honour Sir Larry, Linda Wright, JCA president, stated their decision was revoked, alleging, in spite of records to the contrary, as we have displayed, that Sir Larry's, quote, stated publicly that he saw nothing wrong with his decision to tour apartheid South Africa. These words are a blatant distortion of Larry's statement. Sir Larry, a person of integrity, will probably not respond to criticism based on the distortion of his sincere expression of regret. He will continue to speak all of the truth to everyone. A reasonable observer of his record, as unfolded herein, would be justified in asking why, after all the punishment and indignity Larry and his team have already humbly endured, and the several public expressions of regret publicly made to Jamaica's cricket fraternity, should the threat of the sword of Damocles, motivated by the obsessive hate of an apartheid system that has ceased to exist, and where the sanctions placed on the offending country South Africa have long been lifted, still hang uneasily over no other but Larry's head after 40 plus years. Put another way, when will his punishment cease if all others in the world have for so long been allowed to move forward in peace and reconciliation? Rabbi Hillel, a reasonable and holy man, would most likely have the answer. If not now, when?